Good morning and welcome to another episode of Survival and Thrival. This is the second and hopefully last week that we'll be recording versus going live on LinkedIn. I think I'm on the back end of my own personal COVID experience, so we hope to be live again next week. For those of you who've been asking, I'm fine. I've had a fairly mild case, I believe, of COVID, so I feel very, very fortunate. And although my wife and three sons also tested positive, two of them were asymptomatic, and the rest of us have had fairly mild symptoms. So thank you for all your well wishes and your thoughts and prayers. And now back to our regularly scheduled program. You know, with our Survival and Thrival series, we've been preaching an offensive mentality since the very beginning of the pandemic. We're here to help the leaders of entrepreneurial companies navigate COVID and make the right moves to come out of this stronger than before. And today we're going to be talking a lot about your teams and your leadership through this COVID chaos. We'll be discussing how best to engage your teams and how to help them reach their full potential. This morning I'm visiting with Carla Brondo. You know, some people claim to be thought leaders and, some people aren't, but I think Carla is absolutely, she puts the leader in thought leader. But listen to this resume. Carla is a leading authority on leadership for a more collaborative and productive workforce. She has educated leaders and managers in companies like Motorola, Coca-Cola, and Panasonic, governmental agencies like the EPA and others, and schools like Georgia Tech and Texas A&M. She is a certified speaking professional, a registered corporate coach, a certified facilitator, a certified professional motivators analyst, a certified professional behavioral analyst, and is a graduate cum laude with a Bachelor of Arts in Education from Brigham Young University. Oh, and she's also written 4 books, including How to Earn the Gift of Discretionary Effort, The Leadership of One, Wake Up the Winner Inside, and I love this title, Have More Day at the End of Your Day. Damn, Carla, I got to admit I'm a little bit nervous talking to thought leaders such as yourself, but thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, well, thank you. And I would just like to congratulate you one more time on making it through COVID. And you are a fighter and a winner. And I know that you'll keep going strong.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for that. You know, before we begin, Carla, I usually give a brief update from the front lines, from the CEO forums that we started back in mid-March. But here's the super quick version that won't surprise anyone from our last couple of weeks. I know a lot of us have been hitting the wall for the last 6 or 8 weeks. It's been a really an emotional pandemic, if you will. As you can imagine, our teams are also struggling just as much, if not more. The virus is obviously hitting very close to home for many of us, including myself. And we have the added stress of trying to send our kids back to school and things like that. Everyone is trying to learn how to live with the virus. So we continue to try to encourage self-care and rest and really focusing on what you can control. So Carla, if I may, I'd like to start there. I know you've done a lot of work on managing stress, and I saw your video on how to prevent mental breakdown. I want to start by asking you, how the hell are you doing? How are you doing with all this crazy COVID coaster, as I call
it? Oh, well, I'm doing good. Being quarantined is really tough, but I've worked out of a home office for several years, so that part of it was not hard. But not being able to get out and visit with people and have connections because, in my business, it's all about relationships and it's about networking. And so that's been really tough for me. And some of the things I've done with working with stress come from, because I studied stress for a long time, taken all kinds of stress, read stress books and taken stress, you might say, I've listened to stress tapes and all of that, webinars and on stress. And it just depends on your attitude and how you're going to make it through and what you're going to do to substitute. Because if we get caught in this spiral of, oh, pitiful me, even in dire situations, if you're just thinking of yourself as a victim, then you're going to go down this spiral of stress. And so what in my philosophies and what I've learned in life is that you have to be forward looking and you have to try to find some of the silver linings and you have to kind of jump in where you can on this stress. And so from that aspect, even though I couldn't go to a lot of networking events, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn and felt like I've made a lot of friends that way. And I've been a little more active on Facebook and some of those other, Instagram and some of those other social media platforms to try to meet people. But trying to work with, I don't know, I have to admit, I'm an empty nester, but I can really appreciate what people are going through with kids and the stress of trying to get your full-time work. Like I was speaking to a woman that I'm working for and coaching just yesterday, and they'd been out over the weekend and her husband hurt his leg. So her husband just got out of the hospital. She has a new baby and she's working full-time virtually. I mean, yeah, I mean, that is amazing to me. And so you just have to keep being determined and persevere and say, I can do this. You know, I can make it through.
You touched on a couple of things there. First of all, we did meet on LinkedIn, thanks to Kelly Thomason, one of my key team members. So I appreciate her connecting us for that. And, you mentioned your friend's husband being in the hospital. Life goes on. Mm-hmm. People are still getting hurt. People are still getting sick. People are still having babies. People are still having funerals. And that's, I think, was lost on us the first 3 months of the pandemic. And now as we try to normalize and have some live with the virus, we're still dealing with that. And the other thing you mentioned was, having a new baby at home and trying to work full time. I have utmost respect for moms. Let's start there. But working moms, single working moms, I can only imagine the stress and pressure that they go through with this. And I've got several of my team members in that boat and fully respect what they're going through, especially with young kids trying to go to school and work.
Yeah, my line was I couldn't get my kids to make their beds. How could I get them to do math? So they have a lot of help with online things, but it's still a pressure, getting them online, getting them to finish their work and be focused. Yeah, it's a big challenge, and I respect them and what they're going through now as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we talked about before was you've got a video out called How to Prevent Mental Breakdown. I think that's very, very timely. As we've talked before, the first 3 months or so of this, it was absolutely a sprint. We're going to get through this. We're going to get done with it, and let's go. And then we realized, oh, crap, this is not a sprint. It's actually a marathon. It's not 12 weeks. It's 12 months. So people are learning to live with it. And it's been for the last 6 or 8 weeks, man, I've seen it's gotten a little bit better, but a general malaise is the best word I can think of for it. And I know it's impacting a lot of people along this continuum. Talk to me a little bit about that, the mental health aspect of this, and how do we prevent that mental breakdown?
I think there are several strategies that you can use. And one of them we talked about just before we started this, and that is to still continue to get outside wherever you can. You can still exercise, even though some of the gyms are closed, we know. There's still their neighborhood, there's still parks that you can go to and take your kids for that. And especially getting the kids out of the house is extremely important because being all cooped up all the time, you're going to have a lot of problems with them. So I would maintain that. I would try as much as you can to have a schedule for the day. Not just, and one of the things I said in when you referenced the webinar that I did is that, do you really want to stay in your jammies all day? I think that it helps when you get up and you get cleaned up, shower, women put your makeup on, and different things like that, because you have a routine and you start. If you have, and one of the things too that really helps you, and I've done a lot of time management training as well. And so if you sit down at the end of the day and do what I say is close out your day, meaning that you're checking off what you got done and you're planning forward till tomorrow, then you wake up in the morning and you know where to start on your day. And because if you don't know that, it's kind of like floundering, like the way I swim. I don't swim well. I just flounder in the pool. And so if you can have and know where you're going during the day, then I think that really helps you as well, not to have that mental breakdown. But then there's things like just taking a break. You've got to have in basketball, when the teams get all flustered, the coach calls a timeout, right? And they all sit down and they talk through it. And talking through it, I think that there's just so many ways that you need to sit down and have conversations with people around you and talk out your stress and have a friend to talk to, because we're all going through the same things, but it really helps to have someone to talk to. You know, going back to the attitude, one of the things I learned that was very impactful to me is that, and this is the Albert Ellis model, but you have an event that happens to you, and then you run it through all of your filters, you know, like your personality and your experiences and your beliefs in the world and all of that. You run it through all of that, and then you get your coping response. Now that's pretty amazing, and one of the examples you can use for that is that just think of the kids. I don't know how old your boys are. Are they in high school?
They're all teenagers.
Yeah, so they're taking algebra, you know, I don't know if they've gotten into trigonometry or whatever, but let's say they have a trig test, and one of them has studied really, really hard, and he wants a 100 on this test because he wants to get a scholarship and get into school. And the other one, I don't know if this is true for you, says, hey, you know what, if I get an 80, I'm going to be so happy. And so when the tests come back, they both get 90s. Okay, so the test was an activating event. What they got, they're going to run it through all of their filters now. So the one that wanted 100 is going, oh no, I studied so hard. And so his coping response to that is very different than the one that wanted, you know, if I get an 80, I'm going to be good. And he got a 90, and he said, yay, look at me, I got a 90. And so in so many ways, that describes what we're going through today. The pandemic is an event. So what are we going to run it through our filters? Are we going to start saying, you know, this is a time for me to rebuild. This is a time for me to revisit who I am. This is a time for me to look at my goals. Where am I going? What am I doing? This is a time for me to refine some of my time management and some of my stress principles that I focus on. And then you will get your coping response. Instead of being a victim, you're going to be this person that says, you know, I can do it. You can be the victor in all of this. And of course, we know that in situations like this, good things come out of it because we change and we evolve. And sometimes we kick out those things that were not as productive as we thought they were, or some of those things like, you know, I really need to change that. This is a great time for us to work on that and to start changing and becoming better.
Man, I love it. First of all, you just described both my two of my kids at home with the perfection and the whatever. But that is, I love that example, though. It gives a really good perspective on how people cope in much different ways. Same result, but much different result for them personally based on their worldview. Very good way to put it. I also have a good visual of you splashing around in the pool, floundering, which is a good, you know, that's really a good example of me on almost all work days, coming in floundering. What am I going to do today?
You'll waste a lot of time when you flounder, I promise you.
You got that right. You got that right. Well, so Carla, let's shift a little bit. I'd like to talk about our teams. Mm-hmm. I know you've done a lot of work as a mentoring coach to millennials as well as first-time managers, many of them the same. What does their world look like today? And as you know, there's no manual for dealing with the pandemic. So we're all trying to do the best we can, but what does their world look like today, and how can we best help them?
I think they're really, I was going to say stressed out, but we just talked about stress, right? But in so many ways, they're in this new territory. It's like dumping out a 5,000-word puzzle, you know, putting all the pieces together. Because they've got to make sure that their people have the right equipment at home. They've got to make sure they've got to learn Zoom. They've got to do, you know, all these virtual things to get together. But I think one of the things that is extremely important for them is to just revisit the basics. Okay, revisit the basics of how they relate to people. So in this time of COVID, they've really got to concentrate on the individual. They've got to concentrate on speaking to that individual and seeing where they are, not micromanaging, but building rapport with that individual and helping. And I think they have to be fair on what's happening with the assignments that they've given them. They've got to check in and see, are there any blocks? You know, one of the things that people hate is to be micromanaged. But if the manager comes in and says, I'm interested in the deadline on this project, are we on track? And what can I do to help you? What blocks do you have that I can remove? Because sometimes people have a fear of asking for help. And one of the things that I don't agree with is there's just an article up on LinkedIn today about companies installing software to see where all their people are, what they're doing at home. And I think that's a real problem, because the best way for productivity and for the people to relate to their team is to trust them. Give them the assignment and give them the deadline and trust them to get it done. Now, in this work environment, they're not going to be sitting at the computer for 8 hours a day, because there's just so much going on. But they're going to be working 8 hours a day, I would say. And one of the things that always stunned me about work in the office is that if the manager could see you sitting at your desk, he thought you were being productive. But that isn't necessarily so. And so they have to trust these people, and especially if they have children or whatever's going on in their personal life, they may have parents that are ill. And I totally believe that when you give people an assignment and you trust them to get it done and give them the deadline, they will do it. That might mean they're working at 6 in the morning. It might mean they're working at 10 at night. But I believe they're going to be giving you the full measure of their time if you've built this trust with them.
I think that's those are all good points. I love I love what you said. Trust people to get it done. That requires, in my opinion, a solid manager and with the ability to hold people accountable. I am not a good manager, and I'm not very good at holding people accountable. So I have had people take advantage of me in the past. So that's the catch, is make sure that you do have some level of accountability in your structure, whether it's as for the individuals or for the system. But I've seen it work. When it works well, it was fantastic. And for me, when it doesn't work well, it's quite the opposite.
Well, one thing on that point too is I think that especially for millennial managers and even some Gen Xers, and some of the first time they've been a manager, they have to have a good self-esteem. They have to feel good about themselves, and they have to have a level of confidence. Because sometimes first-time managers have a little tougher time asking, are you on track? Asking, this is the deadline, are you going to meet it? And you can do that in a nice way. You don't have to do it in an aggressive way. You can do it in an assertive way. And I think that's very important for them to feel good about themselves and learn assertiveness skills so they know how to speak. And they have to be very clear on these things, or you can't be accountable. Very clear on the parts of what they want. And by the way, that's tough because they have to be one step ahead. And that's what I find hard because when I've been, assigning tasks to people, sometimes it's like, I'm thinking at the same time, it's like, what do I, okay. And, I'll start giving them things, but no. The best way is to be one step ahead of them and know before you go in to talk to them. Because if you've kind of outlined it in your mind, then you don't have to back up and say, oh, I forgot. You don't have to go back and do all of that with them. And when you've set it very clearly, then it's easier to hold them accountable.
Well, I love what you said there earlier about what I was going to ask. What I think we can do for our first-time managers, and check on them as a human being, see how they're doing, ask them how you can help. Find out where things stand in a non-micromanagerial way. I think those are all good tips, and I think many people can learn from that. And I'd like to dive into this.
Oh, yeah, just please. 1 second. What you said there is critical. Care about them as a human being. Find out what is happening in their life, and be empathetic with them about what's going on, and that will earn you a lot of trust with those people. So, next question.
Yeah, no, I love it. We talked earlier about moving from a B2C and B2B world to an H to H, human to human. How can we best check on our fellow man and be there for them in a compassionate, empathetic way? I love it. I would like to dive into a little bit of the subject of your new book, or most recent book, I should say, How to Earn the Gift of Discretionary Effort. And I love the way you described it to me earlier. You said from minimal effort to outstanding contribution. I'd like to talk with you about the relevancy of that concept or that subject matter in today's environment, and then we can dig in from there.
Absolutely. I felt really strongly about writing this book because I've worked on a lot of teams. I work with a lot of teams. I work with a lot of managers. And when I'm working with the teams, and the Gallup organization will confirm this, a large percentage of the people hate their managers. In fact, I read one article that said that like 85% of people would take a pay cut if someone would fire their manager. And so I think sometimes managers don't realize that the touch points with people, even those little things in the morning or the look of disapproval, the raise of the eyebrow, if that employee isn't solid in their own, their own self-esteem and their own relationship, can cause a lot of resistance from these employees. And when resistance goes up, productivity goes down. And so what I wanted to write this for another reason is because I believe as you go through and you look at the history of work, as you look at the 20th century, as we ended the 20th century and started into the 21st century, there was just a lot about engagement programs. And I believe engagement is a one-on-one thing. It's not a program. And that when managers understand this and they start to build those relationships, and one of the things that I talk about a lot is that you have to accept people as is. Now, what I mean by that, and you're in the hiring industry, so when you find this wonderful candidate and you bring them in and you hire them, you think, oh, they're perfect. But no, everyone has strengths and limitations. And so what you've done when you hire them is you accept them as is, and then you help them grow. And I like to use the example of wanting a new appliance. And so you go into the store and you wander to the scratch and dent section, and you find this stove that has a dent on the side, but it's okay, it's going to be enclosed, so you buy it, and you get great value for your money. And I think it's the same thing that happens with employees. If you can show them that you accept them as is, and then help them use their strengths, help them blossom, help them bloom, give them assignments that excite them. And in fact, I was working with the Fort Benning years and years ago, and the head of the Army Research Institute there was Seward Smith, and he had dinner with me, and he looked at me and he says, Carla, you should see what happened to these young recruits when I bring them into my office and I say, here's a project. Would you like to take this on? And then he says to them, if it succeeds, you get all the credit. If it fails, I'll take the rap. Do you see how he has unleashed their creativity, their ability to achieve, their ability to be productive because they're working so hard? And I believe that's a fantastic lesson for people that really want their employees to give them discretionary effort. Because there's a big difference in just working for a paycheck and working to your capability.
I like the way you described that discretionary effort, because you can get more out of folks. Also, it hit home to me when you said people want their manager replaced, which is exactly why I stepped down as CEO 4 weeks ago and had Cisco step in as CEO. I wanted to beat into the punch. Hey, one other thing that you mentioned with this book that it resonated with me was a concept that I think the way you described it was redirect, refocus your team in spite of disruptions, and especially disruptions such as a pandemic. Tell me a little bit about refocusing and redirecting your team in today's environment.
Thank you for asking that. In context of the book, it would be called rational alignment. And so what you do in rational alignment to refocus them, and especially in this time when, like I say, we're trying to put the puzzle together, and everything is disruption, is you have to come back to what are the values of our company? What is our mission? And what are our goals? Now, of course, you have long-term goals and you have short-term goals. Maybe they're 6-month goals, but you have to refocus them and redirect them on that because they're pulled in so many ways that we've talked about, with their personal life and their business life being merged together and not really separated because you're not going to the office. And so you have to refocus them in that way. And, back to like the time management and the productivity there, you need to help them understand that they need to close out every day and know what they're going to do for the next morning and where they're going to start. And I think as you refocus them, and the other thing about rational alignment is once you come to them and say, these are our goals, these are where we're going, these are the deadlines, this is what I want you to meet, then they can say to themselves, and especially with the mission and values, they can say, yeah, I can mentally, emotionally, and rationally align with that. And because when, from hiring, that sometimes you get people that are really great, but they're not as necessarily great for that position once they get in there and they get started working. So if you can rationally align them that way, then they can say, yeah, I can do this. Because some people can, they like their work environment, they have really good friends here, but I don't know about the mission of the company. Can I really support that? And so you want to rationally align them that way, and then they feel free to give you the best work.
I like the idea of freeing them up from any other concerns to be their most productive, but also aligning their goals with your goals. That's such a powerful statement and powerful tool. One of the biggest challenges our CEO forums have, Carla, has been around engaging with their employees and really building relationships in this virtual environment. I know many of us have gone back to offices, and many of us are still, as you said, betwixt and between home and office and trying to balance the two. I would love your top 3 to 5 tips of advice for leaders and managers on how to deal with this virtual environment, how to best build relationships virtually.
Well, I think we said one of them was to care about the individual as a human being. I think that's so important. So in other words, you've got to spend a little more time asking about Fluffy, asking about the dog, or finding out what their kids are doing in school, finding out some of those and finding out some of the personal things. Because one thing we didn't mention is that hobbies are important in this time. After we've put in 7, 8, maybe 9 hours a day, it's really nice to have something to release the tension because, we're not computers or robots, and we have to take breaks and to rejuvenate ourselves. And so I think if managers realize that, it's going to be very, very important to them. The next thing I would recap or remind them of is that the touch points are so important to them. And one of the important things is that people don't really listen to the words. I know you've heard this for years, okay? They don't listen to the words you say. That's only 7% of your message. The rest is all what's in your eyes, what's in your smile, and what your face is, your body language that you're showing to them. And if your body language is showing disgust or resistance or I'm not really happy with you, then it's going to come through because your body does not lie. So I tell managers that if you're upset with this person, then you better not have a meeting with them till you can kind of get your mind in a neutral view, even though you might need to correct them. And I think that when you correct people, if we could go on to the next point, one of the things that's come out to me in all of this is that the monthly or the yearly performance review probably ought to go away. Because every time you touch an employee, these touch points, you're actually having a performance review. How are you doing? So your performance review at the end of the year becomes something where you sit down and you collaborate and you say, you did a great job this year, or we can get you a class on this, we can improve this a little bit, and what are your goals for the next year? Because performance reviews in that way should not be to correct them. And by the way, when I say accept as is, I don't mean you accept everything they do, because we're human, we all make mistakes. But the beauty of accepting them as human beings is that you say, this didn't go quite right. What are we going to do to correct it? So people need to own what happened and they need to make it right. And if you give them that opportunity, then you're going to be able to have these touch points with them that build the loyalty and build the trust that you have with them. Because who hasn't made a mistake? You know?
Yeah, I think that's a great tip for all first-time managers is you're going to make mistakes. It's really how you handle the mistakes that define who you are as a leader, as a manager.
Oh, and it's okay to say, I made a mistake.
Right. It makes you a more powerful leader and team member to admit your mistakes. And I've not always been great at that, trust me, but I try to these days for sure. Hey, so Carla, looks like we've got about 10 minutes or so left. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I ask everybody. So the first one is, I'm a silver lining guy. I like to see the positives in everything, even with all the firestorm going on around us. I guess my question for you is, what is one good thing that you either have seen or you expect to see coming out of this pandemic?
As I have read articles, as I have talked to people, as I've listened online, and all of these things, what I see coming out of it is obsolete things are going to be gone forever. That's
how so? What do you mean by that?
Well, obsolete practices like, I don't have one right off the top of my head, but I could give you just kind of a personal example because I've been in the speaking and training industry for years, and it's all changed how you market. And I have to get used to more of the social media and learn how to use that and learn how to make connections. So I think in every company, as you look at the processes that you use, what is not bringing you the results that you want? And at that point, I think those are really going to be gone forever. And so I think that's the benefit. And sometimes the benefit of the pandemic is, as I mentioned earlier, is that you can have time to reevaluate some of these things because some of the busy work isn't quite there. So I think we're going to be more focused, and which is a good point because if I'm going to stay in business, I've got to focus on who my customers are and focus on what they want. And so some of the peripheral things are going to drop off and go away.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has just expedited a lot of change that was perhaps going to evolve over the next 2 to 5 or even 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it's just happened overnight versus over the long haul. And that's, for me, I've chosen to look at that as a gift, mm-hmm. that it's allowed us to make those changes in a very rip the Band-Aid off almost type of mentality.
I'm so glad you said that you saw it as a gift. Because it does
that mindset thing that we talked about earlier.
Yeah,
right?
The gift, and back to the gift. Why I named it the gift of discretionary effort is because every employee has a gift. If you could see their gifts stacked around your office, and then at the appropriate time ask them to unwrap them. And the reason I say that is because you can look at a resume and know what they have, the educational things they've done, some of the skills they have, but you can't see whether they have tenacity, whether they have determination, whether they have the skills to mediate conversations, whether they have the skills of humor. You can't see that. And those are gifts that are stacked all around those offices. And so as you have these human-to-human conversations with people, and as you meet with them, then you'll see that they have these gifts and you'll know when to ask them to open them. So that little diversion there.
I love it. So Carla, what is one good thing that you've seen come out of the pandemic? And let's start over with that one. What is one good thing that you've done with the pandemic, and perhaps one thing that you would consider an F up or things that you'd like to do over?
Oh, one thing I've done. Well, I have reconnected with a lot of people that I've known in the past, and that also is the a mental and emotional stamina that you need from people because you need friends around you. So I would say that is the one thing I've done. The one thing that I would do over is take my own advice and make sure I get up in the morning. and get ready for the day and have a positive attitude is what is about going to happen. Because, some people can work out of fear in this environment. And if you're afraid that it's never going to get over, if you're afraid that I won't find new customers, if you're afraid that, I'm just going to be stuck in this forever, then you will be. So I really try to take my own advice. And I admit there's days that I've gotten up and it's like, oh, brother, what am I going to do? But then you've got to just turn it around and say, I'm going to make this work.
I think I appreciate you admitting that even you have down days. I think everyone out there has challenging and down days, and so don't ever think that you're not that you're alone in that. People out there, but it's just a matter of how you attack the day after that and try to get back on your feet. And resilience. I think you used the word grit or determination or something like that. I love tenacity. I love those words. How about one thing that you've either stopped doing that you'll continue to stop doing with the pandemic, or maybe something that you've started doing that you want to continue?
I think what the pandemic has, did I say pandemic? what the pandemic, I can't even say it now. What the pandemic has taught me is to start looking at social media, online courses, and all the things that are coming in the future. And so I'm going to stop thinking about the speaking and training business in the old terms of being live in the classroom and start thinking of it more of what I can give to people online and how we can have virtual meetings that are just as energizing as live meetings, which I'm not sure that's possible, but because I love live meetings and I love to put people in groups and I love to hear them talk and I love all the things about training and live training and retreats and what you can do with people. But yeah, we've got to move. And so I guess then I'm going to start more of what you can do just virtually and online. So that's been a real change for my mindset. So I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing with social media and meeting wonderful people like you online. So I feel like anytime I do that, I've got a new friend, and I feel like you're my new friend, Kurt.
There you go. Awesome. By the way, it sounds like you had the ice cream man behind you there for a few minutes when you were talking. Is there an ice cream truck out there?
No, I have a wonderful clock that plays music on the hour.
Very nice. All right, so let's one more question, and that is the personal question, which is, tell us one thing that we wouldn't find out about you on LinkedIn, about your personality, your background, your interests, something like that.
In some ways, I'm a little more introverted. I don't share a lot of those things, but this is one thing that I probably will only share with you, okay? I grew up on a farm in Idaho, and my dad had daughters, not necessarily sons. He had sons later after me, but there were daughters when I was growing up. So my sister and I used to rake hay and bale hay and do all the farm work. And the thing that's interesting to me is that I used to dream about being somebody when I was doing all that farm work. And then I heard a quote by Lily Tomlin, and I really related to it. Lily Tomlin said, "I always dreamed of being somebody. I guess I should have been more specific."
I love it. And I appreciate the background. That's that's a very interesting tidbit that we wouldn't have known. And thank you. I always elicit some great responses. So thank you for sharing. Carla, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close it out?
I would just like to add that I'm delighted to be here today, and I am so glad to be able to share some thoughts about discretionary effort and share, because I know that there's a lot of managers that want to be a great manager. And there's a lot of employees that want you to be a great manager. And what's in my book kind of gives you a roadmap for those touch points with the employees and for making better relationships with them. And that's what I would hope it would do for everyone. And the program that has been popular is called Leaders They Love. And, they don't love everything about you. And we don't love everything about work, but there's got to be a certain percentage of it. I like to say that you've got to like 80% of what's happening around you. The other 20% no one could ever like. So we have to focus on the 80% that's good, the 80% that we can make better and go forward with and be victorious in what we're doing.
I love it. I love it. And so we make sure everybody knows you can buy all four of Carla's books at Amazon. Carla is Karla, Brandau, Brandau. Go to Amazon. Carla, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your insights and appreciate your time, and really appreciate all that you're doing out there. You are doing good things for people, and the world needs you. So thank you for all of that, all of your leadership.
Thank you.
And all of you out there, for all of you out there, thanks for joining us. We're going to be live again next week. I'll be hopefully through all my own COVID adventure. I'm going to be visiting with my friend Alex Drost, and I can promise you we'll be talking a lot about connections and business development in a virtual world and in the new world. So join us next Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Central. Until next week, stay safe, stay strong, and let's go.